Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today I want to show you how to combine ice resin with color spray for card making. The three pink strips that you see on the front of my card are actually pieces of text paper. They've been sprayed with a pink color spray and then coated with ice resin, and that gives them a really unique texture and also makes them a little bit translucent. Now they've been cut down using a paper trimmer and simply arranged onto the front of my card as three strips. It's a really fun way and a different way, I think, of using your resin coated papers, and it's a really easy one to do as well. So a couple of the supplies that you're going to need, of course, your ice resin, and this is a nice way to go about it because this makes up 1 ounce of the resin. It measures it all for you, so this is great, especially if you're new to mixing and pouring with ice resin. You'll also need a sheet of text paper, and this I've just torn from an old book, so you'll need a piece of paper to do this as well. I'm using a color spray. This is from Clearsnap. It's the Stephanie Bernard color spray, and this is in guava, that pink. You'll also need a sponge, a little kitchen sponge, to apply your resin to your paper. You'll want to have a craft sheet to protect your work surface, and then also some latex gloves on your hands as well. Now, to mix up the resin, you're going to need a little cup and a stir stick, and that's also available from the Ice Resin people. So first things first, let me scoot these things out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and spray my text paper with some pink. So I'm going to bring in something else to protect my work surface, which is just a cardboard box, and this will catch any of the spray as I'm spritzing my paper. I'm just going to lay this flat, and the color spray, it's a dye ink, so it will color this really pretty completely if I want it to. What I'm going to do is just hold it a couple of inches away, come at it from an angle, and spritz a couple of times. And I like to get some areas that are darker as well as some where it's just kind of a speckly effect on here. Now I just need to let my paper dry. I can zap it with a heat gun, or I can press it down with some paper towel or something, or just let it air dry. And while it's drying, I can go ahead and mix up my resin to coat my paper. I want to show you how to mix up the ice resin, and it's not hard because you'll have complete instructions, of course, but sometimes it's just easier when someone else shows you. So this is one way that you can buy the ice resin, and you'll see it's a little syringe type of packaging on here, and this will make up 1 ounce, which is enough to fill one of these little measuring cups, and that's about the unit that I work with for each of my ice resin sessions. So this is a really great way to go. It's also really nice, especially if you've never worked with ice resin before, because you do need to mix equal proportions of a part A and a part B, the resin and the hardener. And this is a plunger, so you're going to snap out the center piece, cut off the tips, and then just use the plunger to put the resin in equal proportions into your cup. So no measuring is even needed with something like this. So this is a great way to get started if you've never worked with the resin. Now the other way you can do it is with what I usually do, which is the 8-ounce bottles, and you buy these together. So you have a part A and a part B. You've got the resin and the hardener, and then you will need to mix these, which is not difficult at all, but you do want to make sure that you're mixing equal proportions. So that's what I'm going to show you now. So I'm working onto my craft sheet, and this is really ideal for working with resin because it can clean up pretty easily. I've also got my nice latex gloves on because you really don't want to get this on your hands or on any other surface if you can possibly avoid it. If you do get a spill though, I've always got wet baby wipes, and these are going to be very, very important, and I always have a package and a couple of them out on my work surface when I'm working with resin. You're going to need your plastic measuring cup and your stir stick. Now these are also available from the Ice Resin people. So they have all of this stuff, the cup and the stir stick and the resin. The craft sheet is from Ranger, of course. Okay, so I'm going to mix up 1 ounce of the resin. You can see I've marked on here just because I thought it made it a little bit easier for you to see the lines on here, because again, it's really important that you measure exactly. So I'm going to start with 1/2 with my part A, and then I'm going to top it up with part B. So let me get my part A here, and I'm going to just simply start pouring. This is really thick. The part A is quite thick, so it's going to come out a little bit like syrup. So I'm just pouring this in here, working slowly until I get up to my halfway mark. And then let that out. And then you notice that there's kind of a drip on the side of this. This is where I go with my baby wipe and just clean up around the outside edge. That means when I put the cap on, the next time I open this bottle, it's not glued shut. Guess how I know this little trick. You live and you learn. So now I'm going to come in with my part B, and I'm just going to top it up. And part B comes out a lot faster than part A, so that may be a little bit of a surprise. So just watch that when it comes out. And a little bit more. And then again, wipe off any excess. Put the cap back on. And now I get to stir. I need to stir this really, really completely. And I usually hold it down onto my work surface and then just sort of fold and wrap the mixture. And when you're looking at it in person, you'll notice that there are what they call striations. It's kind of a stripy effect. You'll be able to see the two different parts as they're blending. So you really want to make sure that you mix this completely and get rid of all of those stripy bits. So I go around, I go right up close to the edge, kind of fold this in like cake batter, scrape down the sides, and you know the liquid is pretty close to the top, so you don't want to get too over enthusiastic, but just fold and blend and fold and blend. You're going to do this for about 2 minutes. That's the recommended amount of time from the ICE Resin people. So make sure that it is thoroughly, thoroughly mixed, and then you will be ready to add it to your paper. I have my resin all mixed up, and I'm ready to coat my text paper that I've already sprayed. And again, I'm working onto my craft sheet. And I've also got my rubber gloves on so I can protect my hands as well. Now the other thing I have is my little 2-inch piece of sponge. And what I'm going to do is just remove this wooden stick, scrape that off. And I can set this right onto my craft sheet that it won't stick there forever. So I've got my little sponge piece, and I'm going to just dip this right into my resin. I'm not dunking it in. I'm really just getting kind of a corner of it because the sponge is really absorbent, of course, and so it's going to soak up a lot of that resin. Now, just lightly, I'm going to come in here, starting in the center of my paper and spreading the resin out to the edges. And the reason I'm starting in the center rather than anywhere else is because by the time you get to the edges, you're getting it onto the paper so it's not ending up all over your craft sheet. It really helps to minimize waste. So again, just coming in here, starting toward the center and then working my way out. And then of course I can see as the resin is soaking into the paper, can you see how that's really changing the color of my paper? And you may think, well, because that spray is a dye ink that it would end up on my sponge, but it's not. It's totally dry to my paper, so no need to worry about the pink rubbing off and losing some of the kind of cool spattery effect of my paper. Okay, so I've got my front of my piece covered. Now I'm just going to flip this over and turn it on the other side. Now you can already see where it's coming through on here, can't you? So I'm just going to carry on again, starting from the center and work my way out. This is going to give me a pretty thin application of resin, which means that I'm still able to either punch through it or cut it. You can make the application thicker if you want to let this dry and then come back and add even more resin. You can certainly do that. Resist the urge to simply pour your resin onto your piece because that really gives you a lot more resin than you need, and it will kind of, go off the sides and things. So if you want to add another layer, let this dry and then come back and repeat the process. So I've got this already coated on the back. That didn't take long. And then I can take this, and again, I like to double check again on the first side just to make sure that I've got it all. And then I need to decide which side is going to be my front side for my project, because the craft sheet will have a very indistinct texture to it, but it does have a very slight texture to it. So whatever side I'm letting dry onto the craft sheet will pick up some of that texture. And if you're using a garbage bag as your surface, that will have even more of a texture that will get onto your paper, which may be what you want. You may like that, but you just need to be aware of that as you make your decision. So once I have this coated, I just need to let it dry, and then I can come back and use my paper. Now that my resin paper is dry, I can just peel it up off of my craft sheet, and it's ready to cut apart and use on my card. And you can see the translucency of it, and yet still some of that color and some of the speckling effects that I'm getting around the edges. Now I let this sit overnight to dry. It will always depend, of course, on the amount of resin that you put onto your paper and also the humidity in the area where you happen to live. So those are just some factors. ICE Resin recommends that you let it sit for about 6 to 10 hours. And I usually find that doing a batch in the evening gives me a lot the next morning to work with. So now I can go ahead and run this through my paper trimmer to cut it. And I'm not using a terribly fancy paper trimmer. This probably looks familiar to a lot of you. It's just the sliding kind. This is from Fiskars. And I can simply put my resin paper in here and slide that blade, and it will cut beautifully. So you can either cut by hand with scissors, you could use a craft knife or an X-Acto knife, or you can use your paper trimmer. Now, I do want to just put this onto a piece of white paper so that you can see the dimension of this a little bit better, and it will make it look a little bit brighter as well. And you can see here also the speckling effect that I get on the borders. So this is what the paper will look like when it's all ready. And then I'll bring back in my original card here too, and you can see the 3 strips that I've cut and simply glued onto a piece of white cardstock so that it will allow the brightness of that paper to show through. Now, to attach your strips of resin paper to your cardstock, I use, you can either use a glue stick. I like to use Zots, and these are super sticky, clear little dots. And let me peel one off. You can see one of these guys. It's pretty small, and I just stick it onto my resin paper like so. Just press it on there, lift it off, and then you can attach it onto your white paper, and the dots won't show through, and they're flat, so you don't have any little bumps or anything on there. So it's a really great way of attaching your resin paper or any kind of semi-transparent paper onto cardstock, and it will hold it really securely. After doing that, I just added 2 strips of black cardstock, and I put the whole thing down onto this blue spattered paper, and this is just another piece of cardstock with a really fine misting of blue ink spray, and that's from Stephanie Bernard, and this is the sky color. So this is from Clearsnap, and that gives me that really pretty blue textured effect on the background. Now the stamp that I've got here in the front, this is one of my favorites from Invoke Arts, and this is a quote from, of course, one of my favorites, Maya Angelou. So I've just put that across here. I like how it gives you a combination of vertical and horizontal lines on the card. And then, of course, to contrast that with some circles using those brads here on each corner to hold the whole thing together. So this is how to combine ICE resin with an ink spray. I hope you enjoyed today's segment. For more ideas and inspiration, please do stop by my website at saranaumann.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.